name is Walsh, and this piece I'm about to perform is called Is This a Dagger? A case for why art is not a subject that should be taught. Listening, as I think we do from time to time to one another. He says this, she says that, and they say whatever it is they might have to say, or they might want to say about whatever it is, I suppose. Listening, as we do from time to time, to someone whilst they're trying to express a specific point of view that inevitably, I think, reveals something about themselves we can only ever imagine. Or at least we can try to, if we want to. We can try to imagine whatever it is we want to imagine about the other person, whilst they are still trying to tell us something about whatever it is. But which one comes first, I wonder? Our thoughts about them, or our thoughts about whatever it is? I always imagine there is more to whatever it is they're trying to tell us than the words, the actual words themselves. Because besides the words that they're trying to tell us something about, I cannot help but notice the way they use a particular type of reflection whenever they say this or they say that. And I think, that is interesting, isn't it? Is it though? Is it interesting or is it annoying? I think it's annoying actually, and that bothers me. It bothers me to realise I am being so easily swayed from one way of being able to think about whatever it is to another way through the sound of their voice. And I do not know what it means. Well, I do, I suppose. I do know what it means. I think it means that or now I think I will assume a magisterial tone and say we. And I think that this we should include all of us. That we should all listen and listen carefully to whatever it is we are being told through the words, the actual words themselves, so that we can try to, if we can, or if we want to overcome our own prejudice. You know the sort of thing. I do not like the way he looks, or I do not like the way they sound. We make decisions like these ones all the time, don't we? A decision to go one way or another, or to choose this one, or that one, or to say whatever it is we might have to, or we might want to say about whatever it is. But what, and this is what I'm thinking at the moment, is it that makes us make a decision in the first place? Sometimes it seems to me as though it is simple, and I do not even have to think about it. I just seem to know that this is the one I want, or that this is the way I want to go, or that this is whatever it is I want to say. At other times, though, it is more difficult for me, I think, to be able to choose between one way of being or another, or to know that this is the one I want, or that this is whatever it is I want to say. Because there are so many, and perhaps there are too many options that are available to me. Unless, of course, there is no other option, other than to accept the fact, yes, to accept the fact that this is it now, and I'm going to have to go with it, or to go for it being that which is whatever it is being at the moment, which is in whichever moment it is we're in, at whichever moment it is. But is it in fact a fact in fact, that there is such a thing as a fact in fact? I do not know what the answer is to that question, but I can imagine, because that is all I can do, and all I imagine anyone else can do. We can imagine that one day a particular moment is going to come to us, to each and every one of us in turn, when the time for weighing up whatever it is we've been trying to weigh up all of this time, the rights and wrongs, for instance, of this in relation to that, or in relation to whatever it is going to come to an end. And at that moment, which is in whichever moment it is we are in, at whichever moment it is, I think we must accept the fact that this is it, and this is all there is to it, and or to its being, and or to it becoming that which is whatever it is, or it might be, or it might become, because it is our fate. Or is it kismet? And I like that, I like that word, because of the way I think it makes me move my tongue around my mouth, to push it forward toward my two front teeth, to say the sound kiss with a hiss, like this, as in kismet. The word itself, I subsequently discovered, came into English, into the English language through Ottoman Turkish, although it also exists through several other languages: Bengali, Urdu, Hindi, Persian and Arabic. It means it is this way, which is the way it is, because it was always going to be this way, which is the way it is. So do not, and this is, I think, it is my message to you, do not try to fight it, or to in any way try to resist its being, which is whatever it is. It is being, at whichever moment it is being that which is whatever it is being, unless you want to, of course. In which case, I think I would say to you, I think it is up to you to decide for yourself, or to decide for yourselves, if there is more than any one of you ever coming into the equation at the same time. To do whatever it is you want to do. But better, I think I would say, well I would, wouldn't I? I would say this. To just accept the fact that this is it now, and all that there is to it, and to its being until to its becoming, that which is whatever it is being, to its being, that which is whatever it is being, at whichever moment it is. To be in a moment, as we are at the moment, that is not unlike, I imagine, any other moment that has, or that might have ever been. It is no worse or any better, because I believe we are always on the cusp, or we are always in the middle, or in the midst of a revolution. Because isn't that, or rather isn't this, what a revolution is? It is a way for us to be able to try to turn everything around a single movement, whilst we are still trying to be, or to become that which is, whatever it is, another version of that which is, whatever it is, we ourselves are able to imagine, that this is whatever it is we are supposed to be, or that we are supposed to become. It is a heterosexual dream, or is it a nightmare, that continuously comes through or from one generation to another, as tick moves into tock, moves into tick, moves into tock, moves into tick. Because it is in this moment, isn't it? Which is in, what is it? Which is in whichever moment it is that we are in, or whichever moment it is. That it is as if it is the moment itself that is bringing us all together, and into a much closer sense of our being able to be or to become whatever it is altogether. And all at once I can feel it, can you? And as though we're all about to enter into everything, and all at once I can feel it, can you? And as though we're all about to enter into everything, and all at once I can feel it, can you? But I do not know what it is. So I wonder, what is it, this thing that we are, or so it would seem to me, as though we are all about to enter everything. And all at once I can feel it, can you? But what is everything? A good question. Everything is everything that has ever existed, besides everything else, of course. Because as I think we already know this, or as I think that most of us will accept this, there is also everything else, isn't there? As well as everything that is whatever it is, that it is by being the thing itself. I think, or do I feel? I think it is perhaps better for me to say I think here rather than to say I feel. Although I do feel as I want to say it, so I think I will say it anyway. And there you see, I've just said it. I feel as though I want to make a distinction here between that which is whatever it is everything is supposed to be, and that which is whatever it is everything else is supposed to be. And why, I wonder, do I feel, or do I think, or do I do whatever it is I do? Do I feel as though I have to make a distinction here between that which is whatever it is everything is supposed to be, in relation to that which is whatever it is everything else? So a similar process of me having to assume this is supposed to be, or it is supposed to become. Because I want to use the word everything to mean everything that has ever been given a name. That this, for instance, is a table lamp, or that that is a chair, or that is a rather attractive gentleman who is sitting over there. Everything that has, or that might have ever been given a name, that will enable you or I, or to enable anyone, to place whatever it is into a specific context. To put it here, or to put it there, or to put it wherever it is we think it has to go, whilst we're still trying to imagine that everything has to go where it is supposed to go. In other words, it is not necessarily the thing that is the thing itself that has to be placed into a specific context. It is the name of the thing that we have already decided to call whatever it is this, or to call it that has to be placed into a specific context. But remember, in case you forget, or in case you've already forgotten, we are the ones who name whatever it is, because we have this tendency, and God knows where it comes from, but we do, don't we? We have this tendency to want to name everything that is whatever it is, because of the way it looks, or because of the way it smells, or because of the way it does whatever it is we might assume it is supposed to do. But there are, as I think we already know this, other things as well that do not already have names attached to themselves, that some people might want to assume that those things that do not have names already attached to themselves do not exist, or that they are simply exceptions to prove the rule, that the rule itself is correct. You bastard, for instance, you cannot take my name, because they, being those who are whatever it is they are, did not make it into the development of a specific language, or into that as they, being those of us who are whatever it is we are, or we might be, or we might as yet, I suppose, still become, through being that which is whatever it is we are being in, or perhaps it is through being in academia, might say, there are also other things. Therefore, I think it is assumed by those of us who might want to assume this, that those things which are other things, that do not already have names attached to themselves, are never going to be able to fit into that which is whatever it is we ourselves might want to call it our subject. But what is that? Exactly, what is it? Our subject is not a thing that we can ever possess. It is not necessarily even a thing itself that becomes the focus of our attention. It is whatever it is we're thinking about, or it is whatever it is we're talking about at a particular moment of time, when we are thinking or we are talking about whatever it is. It is the name we give to whatever it is we might want to assume that this is whatever it is supposed to be, or it is supposed to become. As the subject itself develops into being or into becoming another way of being able to think, and or to talk about one thing in relation to another, and also in relation to everything else. The subject leads us into a way of thinking about other things, as well as the thing that was the original subject. And these other things that we are thinking about might then become another subject, or they might become a series of other subjects that will lead us into other thoughts and into other conversations. But those things that do not already have names attached to themselves cannot be, or they can never become, another subject, because they're never going to be able to fit into a specific context. And every subject that is whatever it is has to be able to fit into a specific context. So what are we supposed to do then with those things that do not already have a name attached to themselves? Are we supposed to throw them onto a scrap heap, or push them into a box marked miscellaneous? There is no one, I think we know, without the other. We have to have other things around us, so that everything can be said to exist. Or is it the other way around? We have to have everything around us, so that other things can be said to exist. In academia, we have a thing that is called a canon, which is a set of rules by which everything that is whatever it is going to be judged. Because we have to try to find a place for everything that is whatever it is to be fitted into a specific context. Unless, of course, and this is a big unless, of course, it is art. Which in effect means nothing, because in my view, or in my whatever it is, art means nothing. It is a vagabond, a wandering minstrel, a troubadour, or a troglodyte. Art is never going to be able to fit into a specific context. The artist is a performer who comes into the world with a bag of tricks already at their disposal, that other people are going to have to make of it whatever it is they will, or they might not want to make anything of it, and no shame on those who don't want to bother. Art is, by being lots of other things besides this, it is always going to disrupt an assumption that anyone might make about its being or about its having to become either one thing or another. To think about it, for us that is, to be able to think about art being that which is whatever it is we ourselves might want to imagine, that it is this or that it is that. I think we have to assume it is nothing. Unless, of course, and I don't know why I'm saying this, unless, of course, we assume that nothing exists. Is this a dagger I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat of present brain? Art is not a thing itself. It is not, for instance, a truth to a particular material, or to a particular anyone, or to a particular anything. It is instead, I think, it is a potential for us all to imagine something that we might want to call it art, if we want to, or we might want to call it something else, or to call it nothing at all if we want to. Art does not have to answer a question, although it might raise a number of concerns. They therefore, I think, and I'm talking here about those of us who might want to call ourselves academics, they or we, if I also include myself in this term, might therefore assume, I think, that art is somehow a secondary species to those other things that are called subjects, because those other things that are called subjects are likely to draw us into an assumption that there is such a thing as a specific history to which everything has to belong. And it is into a sense of us all having to belong to a specific history that a whole heap of prejudice carries on and on and on. Art cannot be, or it cannot become, either one thing or another. It cannot belong to a specific history that begets a whole heap of prejudice. It is the nothingness, or the potential nothingness of art's history that turns it into a being, or into a becoming, that which is whatever it is, or it might be, or it might become nothing, nada, nashi, kichina, nishto, etc. What is your subject? This question gets me every time I have to try to fill out the questionnaire. What is my subject? I assume there is a correct answer, but I do not know what it is. Because I tend to think through a process of making something that does not have to make sense. It might make sense, but it does not have to. Because I think there is something more interesting and potentially wonderful in the prospect of not knowing that this is whatever it is supposed to be, or it is supposed to become. What is your subject? I mean, is it a still life, or a self-portrait, or an abstract expression, or an immaterial concept that somehow does whatever it is supposed to do? Art is not a subject. Although it is something, obviously it is something. And even if it is nothing, it is still something, isn't it? That might turn whatever it is into something that is something else. It is through its ambiguity, that's not a bad word, or through its vagueness, I think that's a better word, that art becomes whatever it is. I might say to you, I think it is this, or you might say to me, you think it is that, or they might say to us, whatever it is they think it is. Art is the enemy. Yes, that is what I think it is. It is the enemy of those who would try to organise everything and to control everything to within an inch of its life. And here I might add a full stop, or I might just add a comma. Otherwise, what do we have? Utter fucking chaos, as we used to say up north. So to try to avoid everything becoming chaos, or if I might for another moment, allow myself to lapse once again into being that which is whatever it was I used to be, through being a former version of my current self, everything becoming utter fucking chaos. I think we should accept a notion of art as being something that has to become something that is more closely associated with illustration, to make it look like this, or to make it look like that, or to make it look like whatever it is that some people might assume it is supposed to look like this, or it is supposed to look like that. What? Do you think I'm mad? Of course I do not think art should be more closely associated with illustration. I have no problem with illustration being whatever it is, but it is, as far as I'm concerned, it is the death knell to art's being, or to art's becoming whatever it is it might be, or it might become. It is not the illustration of an idea that turns art into being, that which is whatever it is, but the suspension of our own disbelief that turns it into being, that which is whatever it is, which in turn turns whatever it is into art. It is not about you, or I, or anyone else coming to a particular moment where we might conclude, or we might even want to say it out loud. Now I see what it is. Art is not a game of Sudoku, or a crossword puzzle, or a dagger that I see before me. It is the suspension of my own disbelief. And I think I must admit this. I'm no longer interested in a philosophy of self, a notion of being that is supposed to operate through an assumption I am supposed to be, or to become that which is what I think is a false creation that proceeds from the heat-oppressed brain of René Descartes, who I imagine was on his own one evening and in a particularly bad mood with God, when he wrote in his native tongue and with a long quill pen the following word: Je suis, pense, donc je suis, which he subsequently translated into Latin, and for the sake of official propriety, cogito ergo sum, which translates into English as being, I think, therefore I am. But what is it, René? Are you trying to tell us something about yourself? But I want to know something more, René. I want something more to come from you that might be able to move me beyond the realm of reason into a little ecstasy, perhaps. Reason, it's like an excuse note for not being able to come out to play. If I, for instance, am looking at a painting of some trees, I might, to begin with, that is, begin to think about something to do with the trees themselves, that the painting itself is reminding me of. But this thought only occurs to me through my own experience of already having looked at some trees and thought about whatever it was. Are these trees familiar to me, or are they strange? Then another question might occur to me. What do I think of the painting itself? Do I like the way it looks, as though the paint has been moved across the surface of whatever sort of surface it is? A stretched canvas, a piece of paper, a hardboard, or perhaps it was painted directly onto the wall. Can I imagine the moment when the painter, him, her, or themselves, were there, whichever moment it was, with this thing that is now the thing I have to look at, and to think about whatever it is? Well, I'm still trying to imagine a moment when the painter, him, her, or themselves, was still there with this thing that is the thing I have to look at, and to think about whatever it is. To move a brushstroke over another in an effort, I imagine, to try to encapsulate or to eviscerate the one that was already there. But it's still there, isn't it, and vaguely visible beneath the one that became the subsequent brushstroke. Why are they doing this? I imagine they were trying to unburden themselves of a feeling that they were feeling at that moment. What if I do this, or if I do that, will it work? What does it mean to work? Or will it make sense? What does it mean to make sense? Does everything I do have to make sense? No. Stop thinking about it and do it. And if it feels all right, and even if it does not feel all right, do it anyway. Because sometimes I think it's better to throw caution to the wind. Of course, it is a risk, isn't everything? So what if we make a mistake? It is not the end of the world, is it? Unless it is, of course. Don't blame me, Your Honour. I wasn't even there. Sometimes, I don't know about you, I just want to let go of everything in the hope it will alleviate the boredom of trying to live or to lead a sensible life. What if I save up enough money to go to Magaluf, or to buy a new car, or to build an extension onto the back of our house? Or what if we decide to live it large until one day that it's going to come to us all, when it all comes to an end? How do we, I imagine, this is a question I'm asking, as a collective, how do we try to overcome our own prejudice? Well, we don't, do we? It's a simple answer I would give to that question, because it is so often the collective itself, and I really want to emphasise this point, it is so often the collective itself that draws us into a particular way of thinking and into a particular way of behaving, so that we never take responsibility for our own way of being, whatever it is we are trying to be. It was her, Your Honour, she made me do it. Then they add statistics to whatever it is, which is when I think the competition really begins. I'm not looking at trees at the moment. There are no trees in this room as far as I can tell, unless we are able to imagine there are trees in the room this evening. If I wanted to look at trees, I could go for a walk through a forest, or I might close my eyes and try to remember a moment when I was looking at a painting and I was thinking about whatever it was that had nothing to do with trees. And I thought, well, it doesn't matter. It was a long time ago and we're here now, aren't we? And I'm glad about that. Now, before I bring this, whatever it is, to an end, I want you to look at me, if you will, and I want you to imagine that I'm a reasonable person. So what do you think? How do I come across to you? Do I look like a reasonable person? No, you have to admit it. You were judging me, which is fair enough because that's what I asked you to do. I asked you to look at me, and in a way I suppose I was asking you to judge me like you might judge a book by its cover. And I always remember thinking, why not? After all the effort that someone must have put into making it look like whatever it is. And now they're asking us to potentially ignore it altogether, just in case it influences decisions we might make about what is supposed to be on the inside. Too much emphasis, I think, is placed on the inside, and at a cost to everything else. Sometimes I don't want to have to think about the inside. I like what's on the outside. The words in a book are only there to indicate whatever it is we might have to think about ourselves. When you look at me, do you imagine my contents? When you listen to me, do you imagine my contents? I think I am both the image and the words coming into play through your own thoughts. But I only want to take you so far. I do not want to have to take you all the way or to finish you off. I use words to break through the silence which embarrasses me. Art is not, I remember saying, a subject in the way we might be able to say that geography is, or history is, or anthropology or sociology are subjects. The subject of art is not art, because art is not a thing itself. And I'm not saying that geography or anthropology or sociology are things themselves, but I am saying this. I think there is something in the way a notion of the subject is able to develop through arts being that which is whatever it is, or it might be, or it might become, through its vagueness and ambiguity. Do you like it? I do not know. Is it good or is it bad? I do not know. Or perhaps I am indifferent to the claims that some people might make that they are a connoisseur, or that they are part of the cognoscenti, who have already been invested with the power to be able to decide that this is whatever it is they themselves might assume it is supposed to be. Art does not have to follow a trend or belong to a particular branch of knowledge, a world of tired metaphors and turgid attempts to explain that this is whatever it is, or it is supposed to be, or it's supposed to become something that might accrue a specific value. Is it a masterpiece or masturbation? I think I'm okay with it being either way. So long as I do not have to endure another person's prejudice. I would rather be able to think about things that have been excluded or previously overlooked, that might be called unconscionable, isn't that a lovely word? That did not make it into the world of fine art. Because it isn't fine, is it? And it is not always fair to exclude someone or to exclude something on the basis it's not going to be able to fit into the system that we ourselves have invented. To try to control the value of what everything is supposed to be. And they use words against us which are often exclusive, repressive, or is it oppressive? If I, for instance, wanted to call you sweetheart, or I might want to call you something else, some people might say that the word itself was incorrect, and I understand why they might have reasons of their own for not liking a particular word. After all, we all come from our own background, which at least contributes to the way we understand language and to the way we develop our own sense and sensibility. But there are those who would assume that there is such a thing as an ultimate authority to which we are all supposed to acquiesce. You cannot say this or you cannot say that. Well, I have, haven't I? I've just said it. Too much of my own time on earth has already been spent trying to placate those who think they already know. I dislike their assumptions and insistence that there is such a thing as an appropriate way to be or to become anything. So I take the word, which is the word for everything, and I take another word, which is the word for else, and I join the two words together using a hyphen to create another word, which is the word for everything, that is everything else. So I can talk about those things that have been excluded, like the love, and yes, I am going to say it, that dare not speak its name, and for whatever reason it is, or it was. Well, what they do in the privacy of their own homes is one thing, but when they try to ram it down my throat. To be or to have become either one thing or another is not the only option that is available to us, because I believe we can resist the influence of those with autocratic tendencies who believe that everything is supposed to be in accordance with their own scripture. So away from me, Satan, I would say to them, whilst I am also at the same time making the sign of the cross in the air with these two fingers. And all of these things, the devil said to Jesus, will I give to you if you will fall down and worship me. It is the else joined onto the word everything that makes everything else become what it is. Through its being and all through its becoming, that is another possibility, and that is all it is, and all it ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Now it is no longer assumed a man and a woman must come together. And if a man should also lie with mankind, as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. In nomine Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. I think, therefore I am. It is a joke, isn't it? What if nothing exists and everything that is, whatever it is, we ourselves might want to assume it is, becomes nothing. And in the end, everything becomes nothing. I would argue, but not, I hope, in an adversarial manner, or perhaps I would not mind a little bit of argy-bargy, that there is always going to be or become something else besides the limitations of our own experience, something that is not necessarily measurable or possible to put into words or into any other form of annotation or address. To try to name that it is whatever it is, we ourselves are trying to imagine that this is whatever it is. Well, I do not think that is particularly useful to try to name everything. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I think we should try to get rid of, and as much as we can, a tendency to want to name everything, and to turn everything around to face the same direction, with the labels clearly visible from the front. We. And by saying we here, I think I mean all of us, should grapple with language, and we should struggle through the inevitable complications of words to try to find the one or the right selection of words to be able to say. I do not believe that there is such a thing as the right word or the right selection of words to say anything. I think there are words, obviously there are, otherwise I wouldn't be able to say this to you. There are words, but I do not think that words were there at the beginning. I think we make them up as we go along to do whatever it is we're trying to do, until somebody or until something comes along to distract us from all of this gibbering and jabbering. Does anyone fancy an apple? What is it? I think you have to taste it first. Is it nature or is it nurture? I don't care. What I am needs no excuses. Words create a confusion, as much as they might be able to create anything that is anything else. And if somebody, for instance, was to say exactly the same thing as me, I think that their words would not be the same as mine, because everything that is whatever it isn't entirely independent. Maybe it's not independent, and maybe it's not entirely. I think it is so hard, isn't it? The end.